Hi, this is Alexcursus, a show where I sometimes use Gunpla and Gundam Manual to discuss some Gundam lore. This time, we are taking a look at probably the biggest spoiler ever in Gundam history that have been going on for a whole year, but no one caught it. And I think Bandai is still getting away from it. What I'm talking about is the ending of Gundam GQuuuuuX. If you haven't watched it, I think you should. It is relatively short, only one season, 12 episodes. Where do you watch it? Heavily depends on your region, but I'm sure it should be on, say, YouTube in the near future. If you haven't and is not convinced by how GQuuuuuX looks, or you heard about the premise but isn't really on board, maybe this video would change your perspective. Having said that, I will save the spoiler heavy sections at the very end of the video, because what I want to talk about has a lot to do with these guys in universe lore. Yeah, the RX-78F00 and RX-78F00E both have quite a bit of backstory, like in universe lore about them, explaining how they come to be in the Gundam world. I talk about a little bit with the RX-78F00E EG kit, but I will go in a bit more in this video because it is a lot more relevant. Now, for those of you who don't know, the RX-78F00 started off as a movable statue slash animatronics that was being stationed at the Yokohama harbor without all this extra armor. And the lease for the land have ended, and so Bandai moved the Gundam and converted it into a statue to be displayed in the Osaka World Expo 2025 with all the extra armor that you see now. And this upgrade turned it into RX-78F00E. Before I go into the actual lore, now there isn't a explicit in-universe lore saying that, oh, the RX-78F00 who have been stationed at Yokohama for testing was moved to the Star Jabra after a while, but that's what I assume happened. As one of my favorite thing about Gundam lore is how much of it reflects the real world conception and production. So let's presume in universe RX-78F00 got upgraded to RX-78F00E. So at the end of the 1-year war, the RX-78-2 was destroyed. Only the core fighter remains. And so sometime after the Axis shock, people want to research more about armor raids and just Gundam in general. So they make a replica of Gundam, and that is the RX-78F00. As you would know, RX-F00 doesn't have these glass armor on it, but these armor pieces isn't exactly quick removal, so I am not going to pull them out or put them in mid-video. So the RX-78F00 is a replica of Gundam, presumably somewhere in the late UC 90s or early UC 100s, or maybe even later. The point is, by this point, the size of mobile suits have been shrunken. The technology allowed them to build smaller mobile suits, but they still built RX-78F00 as its original 80 meters size. Having said that, they don't exactly have the old school production technology to make it so presumably RX-78F00 is built with all the improved later UC technology. They go on and test how it moves, etc. That is the premise of the Yokohama 1:1 scale Gundam animatronic show. Now, one of the show is when they imported or make a copy of the original Gundam's learning AI into the RX-78F00, because that is one of the features that allow RX-78-2 to fight all those powerful Zeon mobile armor despite having disadvantage in, say, cycle meal, power output, and firepower in general. However, when testing the original AI, as they call them in the show, the RX-78F00 shuts down, and the pilot starting to hearing the Lala song. And after the Lala song, the pilots hear a voice. The voice identifies itself as Admiral Ray. Very quickly, the voice realizes it is the AI itself, and it is not actually Admiral Ray himself, but it is the AI receiving the memories of Admiral Ray being broadcast during the access shock. Now, we don't know how Admiral Ray's memory being broadcast during the access shock gets into RX-78F00. There are few explanations. One of them is the optical computer in the original Gundam is actually somewhat cycle meal sensitive, because as we know, cycle frame grows when it is activated. It is possible that the original Gundam's optical computer can function in a similar way. Another explanation is because this thing is presumably built around the same time as the Formula Gundams. So it is possible that somebody snuck a piece of cycle frame inside RX-F00, and because RX-78F00 is built with the UC100 technology, it probably have MCA, which can function as amplifiers for cycle mill if there is a cycle mill inside somewhere, much like F91. However, it had happened after a brief exchange. The RX-78F00 AI decided to go back to sleep, and the pilots just returned to base as if nothing had happened, except commenting that he was talking with an old friend. So now we get to, well, Expo 2025. In there, the RX-78F00 have been upgraded into the E-Spec with the glass armor. Employed by GQuuuuuuX, who have been installing AI into mobile suits to work to rebuild civilization after the many wars of Universal Century. Now, some of the promotional materials stated it is in our timeline that it happened, but the show heavily pointed to a Universal Century timeline where the 1 year war happened and the Axis shock happened. So it's pretty much somewhere in the far future of UC, just not sure where. And so they employed RX-78F00E, not sure what the salary or severance packages are, but it is good enough for RX-78F00E to fight off some rather dangerous invaders, attackers to the Star Jabro. And in that show, RX-78F00E definitely shown it has new type psychomeal powers. Now, it is also shown the glass unit. It's definitely helping him out on that front, along with the feather backpack, but I want to save that for that video. Needless to say, we now have an AI on a Gundam with psychomeal power at its grasp. Back to the beginning of the video about the spoilers that I want to talk about. Spoiler warning. And if you have looked at the thumbnail, you will see they have GQuuuuuX on one side and the RX-78F00E on the other. Still spoiler warning. If you don't want to hear this, turn away, shut down the video, or you actually want to know what's going on before you watch GQuuuuuX, sure, go ahead. Okay, so at the end of Gundam GQuuuuuX, in order to overcome its enemy with greater psychomeal power, activates the Endymion mode. Endymion is a Greek mythology figure that is depicted to be loved by a moon goddess. The exact goddess changes depends on the period, and it was later adopted by the Romans to use Diana. Either way, it is heavily implied Endymion either sleep at the bottom of Mount Olympus or some similar mountain cave system on the moon. And GQuuuuuX was built on the moon. Also note that in the show, they call the psychomeal system that the original Gundam timeline would have to be Alpha Psychomeal, and call the Psychomeal on GQuuuuuX Omega Psychomeal. So, Endymion mode is probably referring to something they have found on the moon. Now, when Endymion mode is activated, GQuuuuuX speaks with the Zen voice as Admiral Ray. So, the popular theory is that Endymion is actually Admiral Ray being transported into the GQuuuuuX world after the Axis shock. However, I don't think that is the case. I think what happened is RX-78F00E somehow ended up on the moons of GQuuuuuuX. And because it is built with UC-100's technology, and so when the Flanagan Institute tried to replicate the Endymion, they inevitably copied some far more advanced technology that, one, they totally did not develop, and two, nothing that is cycle frame or movable frame related. Because the RX F00E is pretty much all still using 1-year war style of construction, just with later UC know-how. So back to the thumbnail where they have the Gundam Next Future final, the promotion poster having GQuuuuuX and the RX-78F00E next to each other. I think that was designed to communicating that, yeah, these two are very much related. As for why Gundam GQuuuuuX doesn't outright show that Endymion is actually RX-78F00E, well, like I have mentioned, with the kit, it is plastered with the World Expo 2025 logo. So if they tie the GQuuuuuuX show with the World Expo too much, they may run into some issues when the license expires. In addition, color is famously very cryptic about their story, or the details of their story, the underlayer of their story. So GQuuuuuX is actually a breath of fresh air where the outlines of the story is relatively clean. But yeah, I may or may not rant about GQuuuuuX in another video, but for the purpose of this video, I think it is one of the color signature to not spell it out outright what Endymion is. Of course, it could also be that the Gundam Next Future vinyl poster visual is just made because these two are the biggest events, the poster boys and girls, maybe boys actually for GQuuuuuX, boys and girls for Gundam for 2025. That could be that, but that's what I think. I think Endymion is actually RX-78F00E, the Gundam that have armor rate memory imprinted in its AI computer, and it was discovered by the Flanagan Institute sometime during or after the 1-year war, which led to them develop GQuuuuuX. That also explains why G-threads have such a compact funnel cat ears. But I guess I will wait until the G-thread kit to talk about that. Thanks for watching. See you next time.